So we're making an orange chart. So we're going to mix up the orange first. And often as what I target an orange is the fruit. And certainly they can be redder, more yellow. But so I think this is pretty close to the fruit. It's not like there's a right one and a wrong one. One thing you have to remember is that red is substantially stronger than that, than the yellow is. So we're just going to put a dab the base orange. Now we're going to take that orange and gradually make it redder. We'll start at the low end first, so keep in mind how strong that red is. So now we're going to put down some white and do step downs from there. So this is sort of our last red. So this is just white added to the orange, and we'll take this to the extreme. Normally I'd put white up there, but that would just sort of disappear. So we're now going to add yellow to our orange. I think I'm just going to go back and make that one a little bit more orange. So we're just going to add more yellow to that. And as we're adding more yellow, we're actually moving very close to a yellow deep, which is, and the yellow deep can vary depending on which pigment, but so we're actually maybe even a little past this particular yellow deep. It's looking, but the bismuth yellow deep is quite a bit closer to medium, what your average color would be in medium. But I think this would be our last one. And so your yellows come in yellow light, yellow medium, and yellow deep. So for mixing here, I'm using a yellow medium, airline yellow medium. So that's a straight yellow. So now we're going to do the same colors, but we're going to add white to the color. So we're working the other direction now. So you can see the difference between just the white into the orange as opposed to the white into a more yellow orange. So we're just going to mix up a white and yellow combination. Just going to mix up the red and white, which I like to refer to as a light red as opposed to pink. Pink is a very inspecific color because they can be a very cool or a very warm. I don't think we got enough white in that. So I'm going to use up the rest of this yellow to make more of the orange to finish the charts. So I'm carefully trying to leave a little bit of the existing orange there just so that we can match it. Just going to add a little bit more. I have to add that red very carefully. I think that's going to be close enough. So we'll just mix that all in. drop and roll, get the paint off. So now what we're going to do is we're going to mix up some neutral grays. So we're going to start with the dark gray. So using the ultramarine blue, the burnt sienna, and white. So when you get the white in, you can see whether you've got a blue gray or a neutral gray. This is leaning a little bit on the blue side, but I think that's probably going to be okay for how dark we are. I'll just add a little bit more of the burnt sienna. I think that's just a little bit better neutral. One of the things you have to keep in mind is that what is on your screen may not be exactly what we're looking at here, because the whole color of screens can vary quite a bit. So that's our base gray. So then we're just going to come in and start adding some orange to that. So just a little bit at first. So and this is going to get lighter as we go. So we keep adding. We're going to have to add it a little faster just because we want to get close to the orange by the time we get to the other side. Might have to mix up some more orange. So now we'll clean that brush. We're going to come in there and make that gray lighter. I think we went maybe a little too far. I think that'll be a good step, so I'll just put that there. Then actually I think we can I'm adding a little bit of white just because I'm mixing into what was the darker version. And the precision of this process isn't exacting. What we're trying to get you to do is when you're working with orange, really get in there and work with the different tones of orange, like the gray and the yellower and the redder. Definitely going to have to mix up some more. So I did not mix up enough of the orange, and unfortunately I contaminated all the orange, but I think we have some in amongst the red that's kind of close to what we had, and it's not critical if we get the exact orange, because when you're mixing on the palette, you're going to the colors really, it depends more how they relate to the other colors on the canvas. These colors may look perfect for what you need when you're looking at it on a dry chart, but when you surround it by other colors, that can have quite a dramatic change to that. There's a lot of optical illusions based on just adjacent colors or surrounding colors where you swear that two colors are identical and they're actually quite different. Okay, that looks, let's just make sure that yellow's Looks pretty close to the fruit color. And I'm talking the navel oranges, not the tangerines or mandarins, because they seem to be a little bit more red-sided. I'll just get that orange off that brush. Because I'm using liquids, I'm making sure I dry that brush so as not to add more moisture. So we're just going to add white to our neutral gray there. Maybe go a little bit lighter. We're going to do 4 grays here, so I'll come, just add, oh, we forgot to, we'll put that one. Forgot to put the base swatch down. And then we'll just keep adding a little bit more orange to that. And as we keep adding orange, we may, especially when we get into these lighter colors, may start to add a bit of white, just because the orange is actually going to start making it darker. These are pretty close in value. Sometimes hard to see the difference in value between a saturated hue and a true neutral, because saturation is tied in with luminosity, and luminosity is tied in with value. So sometimes it fools our eye into thinking that it's actually a lighter gray value than it actually is, just because of that saturation. So that's pretty good. So we're now going to make that gray our lightest gray. So I think we'll just do it right on top of that. I forgot to do the touch up again. We're going to just add a bit of white to keep the value close to the base. This gray is definitely a lighter value than our orange is. One of the ways to compare values is to use your camera, take a picture, and then convert it to black and white, and then you can see the value of the color or the different saturations. In the book on color, it talks about, it shows you the different, let's get this. Okay, we did forget to put that one out there. Wrong color. So we're going to do a couple of unusual ones at the end here. We're just going to take the burnt sienna, which is a dark desaturated orange, not as dark as some of these oranges in here, but it is definitely more saturated than those colors in there as well. And you can actually make a very nice orange. Just use, I'm not, oh, maybe we'll put that down there, but adding white to the burnt sienna can, we're just going to put that, where are we going to put it? We'll just put it there. Just giving you an idea of white and burnt sienna do make a lovely desaturated orange. But So what we're going to do is we're just going to add orange to the burnt sienna. And I'm showing you a few permutations of orange here, but there's so many variations where you're, like in this red one down here, we could add more white to those lighter ones, and you can use the complement in there. And we have sort of used the complement here when we've been adding the gray, which contains the ultramarine blue. So I'm going to show you sort of a more unusual combination, and it's not mixing the complementaries together, but mixing the adjacent secondary color. So orange is a secondary color, and so we're mixing up a green here. We're going to make it a fairly light green, something fairly similar to the orange in value. So now we're just going to just start adding, and I find these are some very interesting colors that you get when you're, we're probably going to have to add white to some of these. I'm just going to clean that brush again. I want to just put some of that there. So then we're just going to come in and add more orange to that. And so I like these colors because they get difficult to define. When is this no longer green and when is it start to go orange? It really seems to be about there, but I find that if you were doing a fall scene, these can be really nice combination when you're mixing the orange with the fall orange colors with the summer green colors. In this painting that's to follow this, we're not using these colors, but I still wanted you to see those. So this very similar, but it's where these, and there's certain similarities, but I just find that a very interesting mix, especially if you're using those colors in your painting. So I'm just mixing up a purple now using the magenta rather than the red. Whenever you're mixing purples, you're going to get a much nicer purple using the magenta than you will using the warm red. And it's because of a yellow bias in the warm reds. I'm going to add a little bit of white because we want this to be a fairly light purple. I still think that's a bit too red. Yeah, maybe we'll go a little bluer. Every time I add blue, I'm going to add some white. And that's just based on the fact that blue is a dark color. And so you add a dark color, you got to compensate. So we just put that down there. And so now we're going to start adding the orange to the purple. And so when you're mixing with these, you go with a red or purple, you're going to get different colors. You go with a blue or purple. So there's a whole range of different variations. And that's what I like to see on a palette, where you've actually got down and explored the color. So this was just an exploration of orange, and when you're painting, you may not use all of them, but you can use a whole range. In this upcoming painting to follow this chart, you'll see I've used a lot of these in through here and a little bit in through here. But just watch when you're watching this video, take a look at the colors and how you mix them. Doing these color charts may seem tedious. You see it didn't take that long, but the one thing it does is it gives you an idea like, oh, this would be a nice color. It's like some information. As you get better at mixing color, you can just see this in your mind's eye. But when you start out, it's a good idea to play with these colors and to start getting better looking at colors so that you can see, oh, that's a little blue shifted or that's a little red shifted. That's got a little bit of white, that's desaturated, and it's about learning to see. These are Aquamaster brushes, which I'm going to use for a wet and wet blend. I'm mixing ultramarine blue, phthalo blue. The Stay Wet palette's a little bit watery here, quite a bit watery, but we're just mixing to the blue sky, so we're going to get some more white in here. I want to make sure I mix enough color to get this done. And it's not a lot because I'm really only going to put one strip across the top, but we'll just adjust that. And so I'm using the two blues. The ultramarine blue is a warm blue and the phthalo blue is a cool blue. And then I'm going to add the white just to make it lighter. This is very similar to a cobalt blue, but I prefer to mix this blue rather than use cobalt because I can tweak it a little bit more towards the cool side or the phthalo side or a little bit more to the warm side. So I think that's should be pretty good, but I think we'll just make it a little bit lighter. If you think it's good, it's probably too dark because acrylics are going to dry darker. So we're just going to mix that. So I do know some artists that like to pretty wet a brush, but I never worry about that. So I'm just lifting that up so that I can paint the edges and not have to worry about that. There are some quacks out there that think painting the edges is silly or stupid, but the main reason I paint the edges is if someone likes the front face, then they're going to like the color on the back side, or on the sides rather, not on the back side. But so it really it gives the person who's purchasing the painting an option as to whether to frame it or not. A lot of people or artists would paint the sides black, which I think is kind of presumptuous to think that the black frame or the black edge is going to work for the final user. So I've put a band of the blue down. Now I'm just going to take that and add more white to this. And there's not going to be a whole lot of this showing, but I like to do the whole thing as it has the added benefit of giving you more practice to do these wet and wet blends, but also it gives you the full option to put the clouds where you want. So I'm just put that brush half on, half off the blend. I'm not going to worry too much about getting that blend really smooth just yet. This painting is upside down at the moment. It's a little easier for reach. So I've just added more white, and then I'm putting that band across there, and I'm doing the sides just so I don't have to worry about it later. And then I'm going back and forth and then gradually move the brush up and then back down. And then so I think I'm still going to go lighter. We'll take that right to the bottom, or not the bottom of the canvas, but to the bottom of the horizon. I don't think that was enough weight. And so sometimes you can see how much paint is on the brush in the mixed colors. So sometimes I'll just come in and take the straight white in there. And I think I'm just going to come down one more stroke wider. And so, well, blending up slowly. So I'm going back and forth fairly quickly, but I'm moving up and down fairly quickly. We got a bit of a strip there. So now I'm going to put that brush down, and I'm going to pick up a dry brush, and I'm going to start off at the top because that's where it's going to be the driest. And so we're just going back and forth, and if we see a line, we're trying to smooth it out a bit. And so I'm creeping down a bit, and it's getting a bit dry, so what I'm going to come down a little bit quicker. It's pretty warm in the studio this afternoon. The sun's streaming in the windows, and it's lovely. But so we're just smoothing that out. Now this is not super smooth, so what I can do is I can take this brush, and I'm just gonna, sorry I missed that off screen because I didn't want to, so I just misted some water on that, and that's just going to give me a little bit more working time, or it's almost like reactivating the paint. And so I'll sometimes take it to a slight angle rather than going straight across, and that helps get the banding out. And so this is probably pretty good for what we want. So we're just going to, and when I'm doing the sides, again, I don't actually even need to worry about that side because there's gray cloud all on the edge there. So we're just going to bring this, and I'm always painting up, not down, so that I'm not scraping any paint on the canvas. I'm starting with the 3/8 filbert, and so I'm going to start with the orange. It's with the amount of orange in the sky, it's a really good idea to start with oranges, because oranges and yellows definitely are a weaker color and easily contaminated with the blue. So I'm adding white, and you notice I'm adding just a tiny bit of red to the yellow, because the red is substantially stronger than the yellow as far as tinting strength goes. So that's maybe even gone a little bit over the top, but we'll try that out. So we're starting at the bottom, and we're just going, yeah, that's much too saturated. So we're just going to come in, and we're going pretty quickly. I haven't really given the blue a whole lot of time to dry there. I'm picking up a little bit of that through there, which is okay because that blue is having a sort of a desaturating effect. And so that's one of the first things I do when I start trying to get these skies, is I like to go in and get some wet and wet blending. So don't worry too much about finishing it at any. And so one of the things I'll do, why I had so many brushes, is I can come in and I can soften these edges. So this is a brush with no paint on it, and I'm just scrubbing it into what is nearly dry blue. Like it's not really mixing, but you can feel the drag on the brush as you're doing that. So we're just going to come back and start laying in. Okay, so there's a bit of a pattern there. And I'm always looking at the reference picture. It's not that I want to copy that reference picture, but I want an idea of what clouds look like, even if we all have a cliche version of what a cloud looks like. And even if you've painted hundreds of skies, which I have, I still like to get creative input from the sky itself. So I'm switching a little bit to the yellow light there rather than the yellow deep. This is, by the way, yellow light, yellow deep, and a warm red. Doesn't really matter what red. So like a pyro red, a naphtha red, a cad red, they're all the same hue. So they just have some different qualities that don't really pertain to what we're doing here today. But if you're ever curious about learning more about color, I have an excellent book on how to mix with colors. So you can find that on my website, peterjohnreed.com. Thought I'd throw that little bit of ad in there. So we'll just going to put a little bit more of that yellow up there. So this orange paint up here is pretty dry, so I'm starting to do like a dry brush technique into that. And so I'm going to now mix up a gray. So basically you can get a gray by mixing the three primaries together. So this is very orange. So if we add a little bit more blue, that will turn it into a gray. Orange, blue and orange being the complements to each other. So this is only just gray, but that's what you want. You want some really subtle color mixes. Most times people are pushing it a little too hard. We're going to take that blue out. We're just getting a little bit of that. So now we're going to take this orange. This is a very orange gray, so we're just going to add more blue and start cooling that gray down into more of a neutral gray. And as I'm adding blue, it's getting darker, so we're going to have to compensate by adding some white to it. And keeping in mind, this is going to dry darker, so err on the light side. So we're just going to come across here now and put that gray. I haven't really decided what I'm doing on the bottom there yet. This is more of a painting being done as a demo rather than as a specific piece. So as these colors are pretty dry here, so there's not much, there's a fair bit of paint up on the upper part of the brush, but there's virtually none on the tip, which is what I'm using there. So we're going to, the sun is going to be about here, but I'm not too worried about marking that in yet. So I'm just going to take that gray off and I'm going to come back into the orange. So I'm going to bring that orange a little bit more saturated, or a little more red, I guess, because we are going to lighten it a bit, because we still don't want, but we're moving a little bit more into, that's maybe gone a little too far into it. The deep yellow makes a nicer orange than the light yellow does, just because of something called saturation cost. And that's, so when you're mixing a color, that's a little too much. I'm going to mix those two together. As the closer two colors are to the finished color you want, the less saturation costs there will be, meaning that you'll get a more saturated color by mixing those close together. So there's virtually no paint on the brush here, but I want to get in a little bit more of the lighter color in there. So we're going to, this is going to be more of a wet and wet blend here, because that orange I just laid down is still quite wet. And as I continue to work it, it's going to start to dry out. Now we're just going to bring some of this down this way. And I'm putting this in first because this color really is on top of the gray as the sun's bouncing off that, but I want to keep those colors fairly clean. So I'm picking up that gray again. I'm going to have to put down more white. So we'll just come in here. And this is a very light gray, but we're just going to come along there. And so I'm going to come into this slightly darker gray. Now this is way too orange, you can see that, so I'm going to mix up a bit more of that gray and definitely into the bluer side. I prefer to use the ultramarine to make grays. It's just phthalo blue you can mix some lovely grays with phthalo blue, but it's so strong, or such a high tinting strength, that it does make your life a bit of a challenge. So that's still picking up quite a bit of the orange, but I don't think that's going to be a problem for us. I don't normally paint two-handed, but this is just going to give you a better look, and all I'm really doing right now is scrubbing down some of that color down. So this is going to come right up. Now, one of the things this is a fairly dark gray down here, but as we come up on the blue, it's going to start looking lighter and lighter. And just because of the value contrast between the front and the back. So we're just going to, and so I'm going to get a clean brush again, and I'm just going to really scrub those edges. Boy, this is drying extremely fast today. So one of the things, I didn't quite get the edge, so if I just dip that brush into the water, it will reactivate the edge of that and allow me to do a little scrubbing. You want very little, that's almost too much water there, so I'm going to take that off. But adding the little touch of water reactivates the paint, but it can start making a bit of a slushy mess. So you want to use that technique fairly sparingly. It's not something I jump to right away. I try to do it at the same time as if you just lay it down. But temperature has a big impact on the drying time of acrylics. I know when I was painting in Ireland, you had all day practically because it's such a humid, wet country. But anytime I painted farther south, the warm, dry air really makes that acrylic dry fast. So we're just going to carry on, and this whole area up here is going to be fairly dark gray. So we're just right now, usually one of the things when I'm doing something like this, I see I missed a little bit of blue on the corner, is to go sparingly over your blue background, because we did that first because it's going to look best. Rather than have to lay that down after. So you want to try and make sure you're preserving some of that. So I'm just going to come in here. And this color is dry now, so this is very much a dry brushing technique there. And so I'll show you in a second how we can switch that back to more of a wet and wet. So I can come back into my orange, and then I can start just very lightly blending that in. So one of the things, when I first start this, I try to use a little more paint, but as you go, you can do some nicer blending if you're not putting too much paint down, because you're just ending up struggling with all the wet paint, putting paint where you don't necessarily want it. So we're just going to come back over here and start bringing in some of those stronger oranges into the cloud. So one of the things I will sometimes do is I will come in and I'm just going to mark the sun end right there. And so I'm not going to do a lot more than just indicate where it is. I'll be layering that with many colors as we go. So I'm just going to work into the darker gray in the top corner. I think we may look to get that bigger brush, whatever I did with it. So we got the blue, so to get the gray color, we just need to add red and yellow, which is orange. So we're going to want a fairly warm gray, but quite dark. Maybe not quite that dark, but probably a bit lighter than that. The nice thing about color mixing is you don't get terribly upset. You just move that color around until it looks right. So I'm just going to put that down there, and that's probably too dark. It doesn't look so dark on the palette, but when you get it up on the canvas where it needs to reside, we are just going to quickly lay that down. I think we might clean that brush off. And we'll just blend that edge a little bit. I'm not too careful with shaping the cloud. I'm mostly just getting in the the blocking in the color and doing a lot of the preliminary, but I'm going to take some of that paint off just so some of that blue just shows through. It is showing through a little bit in the reference photo. I think that's pretty good. So we're just going to come down here and work that in a little bit. So this is pretty, it's still fairly wet, but you can see it's on its way to drying because the brush is dragging, and it's, you can certainly continue to work the paint like this. It's sort of a wet and wet dry brush, which I find quite useful to work with. But at some point you may want to let it dry because it can start lifting a bit. So I'm just going to come in here, and so this is not as clean a color as I was initially working with, as I didn't clean my brush between the grays. So we're getting a little bit of a, but it's probably not enough. So we're just going to put a little bit more gray in there, and I'm going to have to get some white out here. Figure out, well, there's the white. I'm using a Stay Wet palette, so there's a sponge underneath this paper, and one of the advantages of this palette for things like this is it keeps your paint active for a much longer, like, I mean, this can keep the paint active until tomorrow, possibly not today because it is extremely dry in the studio, and that makes coming back into an area later easier because you've got the color, you're not guessing at how much that color has shifted. And so we're just, you can see that as I'm coming into this lighter orange, that this is not a real saturated, this orange has been grayed down quite a bit, but I think we're going to push it a little bit more into the gray as we move up into the clouds. So I do take the paint off the brush. It's against my Scottish nature to waste all that paint on a paper towel. But you can do an awful lot of this painting without really any paint on your brush. You're just blending in the paint that you have on the canvas. So it seems to go a little bit into the yellow as it goes up. So we're just going to push that up a little bit higher, and there's all this lovely, just a hint of orange in this gray up here. So I was just wondering what I was going to do with that blue spot down there. And we're just going to just put a little bit up there. Okay, so I'm just going to come in this area and put a little bit of a yellow cast on that, or a little bit of a yellow glaze. So I took some of the paint off that brush. And it's not, I don't want to do a glaze, like a glaze would work later here. But the glaze, like trying to do something too wet there, would actually end up lifting up most of the paint. So we're just going to come in with a light blue-gray just along here. a certain amount of this down the bottom is going to get lost when we put the foreground in. So I'm just going to ramp up the orange in there. I'm going to start working on that sun a little bit. And where I'm starting with the mostly the yellow deep, and when we'll build to the yellow light and white as I go. So I'm just stretching that out a little bit. So I think we'll take some of that up into this side here a little bit. And I think I want to get and when you're painting this, you want to make sure that you are taking the time to make sure the color you want is that you've got it, and don't just pile it on because you've mixed it, you've paid for that paint, let's get it on there. It's most of the time, I think a lot of paintings are ruined by impatient color mixing. So wait till you see what you got and if it's what you want. So we're just going to bring in a little bit more of that yellow into the highlights there. We're going to put some more gray on there. One of the things that people underestimate the value of those grays, because it's when I was in high school, I always stood next to the ugly guys because I looked that much better. Not that I really needed to do that, but one of the things that when you put a gray next to a saturated color or a nearly saturated color, it really enhances those colors, because the grays just aren't quite, they're gorgeous, but they really make those saturated colors jump out. That's a little bit on the dark side. So we're just going to come in with a bit more white. That looks a bit better. So we got a little white happening up there, which we don't want. So I'm going to get this quite a bit lighter still over here. When I first laid that, or when I corrected that, I thought I had it light enough, and even this won't be light enough, but there's nothing stopping us from changing it to what is right rather than, or what's going to look best. We're going to leave that little bit of dark there, but we're going to come over here and creep in a little bit lower. So we're going to add a little bit more punch through this area. So we're just going to pump up some of the oranges in here. Very little paint on the brush, just sort of dry brushing lightly. Over top of that, we're going to take just adding little bits of orange to get that sun glow there. Take a quick step back into the sun area. I'm adding white to the yellow. I'm using bismuth yellow, which is a very opaque yellow, but I'm still added a little bit of white to improve that opacity. It looks like quite a lot of white there. So the sun is burning through the clouds right here in several layers. Put that ball there. I'll come back and work the edges of that with some of the deeper yellow. So it's not truly dry brushing, but I am developing a scumbled edge on this, which gives it a more natural look. So I'm just going to add some more white. I want to add a little bit more of the softer yellow orange in here. I'll scrub some of that. And that's the wrong brush, a little dirty. So this is a real random scrub in there. I probably don't need this down here, but just in case when we're painting the foreground trees on that, I'm just going to come around the sun. So the sun will eventually be pure white in there, but we're just building up layers to get there. So I think we'll take some of this, just run it a little bit more along the top. So the first layers we put down really are almost a blocking in, but a little bit more than that because we are blending, but we're just trying to get the huge variety of colors that appear in a sunset. Different grays, different oranges, different yellows. It's one of the things that makes a sunset so spectacular are the range of colors that we see in it. And so the only thing, you can play with this back and forth, back and forth. The only thing you want to be careful of is not losing too much of the gray color. I think we'll go. when you're coming back into an area where you don't want to cover too much, like this color looks too light for there, but it's going to dry darker, and it's probably not far off what the color is that's already down. So I think we're going to get a little bit darker down here. Coming back in here again to make that lighter. Keep being a little too timid with how light to go there. Just going to come in with some pure white. I'll do this a couple of times. Really shouldn't have to, because this is a high quality white, titanium white, but it always seems to need a second or a third coat to keep that nice and brilliant. Clean the brush there a bit, just to blend that red. Most of this red will be behind the trees. So we're going to go back to pumping up the orange in the sky. Finger's always a nice blending tool. I always think that gives the opportunity to get some DNA in the painting. It's going to need a little bit more blending there, but we'll come back to that.